Good morning, good morning. You are now tuned into the Elife Power Lunch Show with Dr. Baruch and Kris Murray. How are you?
I am doing great, Kris. How about you?
I am wonderful.
That is good. That is good. It's warm enough outside for you?
It is. I actually really enjoy the warm weather, as you can probably tell from our colder months when I was just longing for the warm weather.
I enjoyed the rain, though.
Really?
The rain was good. It cooled things down a bit. It allowed my plants in my yard to grow a little bit, which, of course, on the flip side of that will mean that I'm going to have to cut some grass. But it's okay. It's okay. It's one of those cycles of life that we decided to accept. Because why should we be cutting the grass? The grass didn't. Anyway.
Right.
But, and we spend money. You know, the guy came around and he said, yeah, I can cut your grass. I said, for how much? He said, $120. I said, okay. Yeah, let me do the math on that for a minute. I said, it's going to take you about an hour, $120 an hour? I want your job.
Right.
So I took it and I cut the grass myself.
Awesome.
Yep. But what else is going on? You got any hot topics? Anything hot on the wire that you need to get off and get out?
I mean, there are a lot of things that are kind of in the headlines.
Just one, Kris. Just one.
I don't want to talk about
I don't want to talk about him.
I don't want to talk about him, but he's definitely in the headlines as usual.
T-Rump. He's the T-Rump.
Yeah, so
all the news. I'm ready to talk about something else. What about something positive?
Something positive. Well, there is a young lady who has a lemonade company. I don't know if you guys saw on Shark Tank. Her company was originally called Malika and the, I'm saying it wrong, what's her name? Malaya and the Bees. And now she changed it to Sweet something or another.
Okay.
But anyway, she's convinced an NFL player to invest in her company, which I love because, you know, I'm all about entrepreneurship, especially pushing our young entrepreneurs. So I think that's a positive thing that she's gone from from a vision to being on Shark Tank and getting a lot of exposure to now actually getting a large sum of money to promote and grow her business.
And I think another good part of this is that you tap into somebody who has the resources to support you without calling you up every morning. Hey, how much money we make because I'm hurting.
Right.
You know, who wants that on their neck every day? I know I didn't. Not when it was happening to me, and I'm glad it's not happening anymore.
Right.
It's definitely a challenge, but that's good. That's good to hear. You know, it's more of us. I hear more businesses, more food businesses. I was listening to the gentleman who started the business. What is it? Buy Black. He's out of Atlanta. I think there's something else.
Buy Black Now.
Buy Black Now.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about how many of us use hot sauce. And I was like, well, everybody does, you know, especially down in the South, right?
Right.
So they're using hot sauce, and then he said, well, how many of you use a hot sauce made by somebody who looks like you?
Right.
And it was like no hands that went up.
Right.
And if you do, you're making it at home. And I said, well, he was saying that there's so many of us that know how to make really good hot sauce. Why don't we go ahead and bottle it and distribute? And yeah, I'm on board with that. I think that's a great idea. I'd love to see that manifest. But we're live on Facebook, aren't we?
We were.
Were? Okay. So you're not looking at us anymore, so we're going to talk. The camera's gone, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure with the issues. I can fix it if you want me to do that.
Sure. As soon as we invite our guest on and we start, kicking it, then you can, climb under the table and plug the camera in.
Switch my hat. Got it.
There you go. So, anything else?
That's it. I just wanted to share that good news. I saw it in my timeline, and since you wanted something positive, that was the first thing that came to mind.
Okay, great. Well, in the United States of America, we realize that racism is real. We realize that there has been a campaign against people of color ever since. Why we have our thoughts and our feelings about that. Some of us think that, there's a little bit of jealousy and envy, and there's a motivation to terminate one kind or race family so that the other race family could survive. There's a whole lot of different philosophies out there, but one of the things that is clear is that seemingly we're not gaining ground. So whatever position we're taking as people of color,
right,
and we're not gaining ground. So whatever position we've taken, we need to check it, because it should have netted some kind of measurable return at this point. And I can look up today and remember back in the 70s and reading about the 60s and the 50s that things seemingly were better. The nucleus of our community was stronger. We were a tighter group of people. Something has invaded, infiltrated, and totally decimated what once was the African American, black, or however you want to define it, colored folk community.
Right.
And we've got a gentleman on who's going to be speaking about that today in a book that he's written. So let's bring on Brother Stephen Tillett. How are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Great, great, great. Well, thank you very much for coming on board with us. And I'm going to do something that an engineer would do if he was here. I would tell you, look that way.
Look that way.
Look that way, and position your mic so that your mic is going to allow you to look that way and be comfortable with it.
Okay.
So, sorry, we didn't do that before the show. You all forgive us out there for this brief interlude. Now we're back from the commercial, and we're talking about Stephen Tillett. I went to school with a Follett. But tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where you from?
I'm from Washington, D.C.
What?
Born and reared. Born and reared Washington, D.C. I went to St. John's College High School, where we beat down your alma mater, McNamara, on a regular basis.
Where's Rolling Grimes when you need it?
And then went to American University undergrad and Howard University for seminary.
Okay. Right, that's a lot of diversity. Yeah, from St. John's to, I remember back in the day, St. John's didn't have a lot of color.
We were about 10% then.
Yeah. When my brother was there, it was probably a little less than that. But so what got you, into seminary? What made you think that was a good route to take? Was it the money? Was it the mission? Was it a calling?
The money, you got jokes. The mission and the calling.
Okay.
My original plan was actually law school and politics. Fortunately, the Lord saved me from that. And so I ended up attending a young adult revival at my home church, Asbury United Methodist, downtown, 11th and K Northwest. And one of your state senators, C. Anthony Muse, Bishop Muse, was the preacher that week, and I began to hear and understand the gospel in a new way, and that changed the trajectory of my life, and I'm grateful because I feel this is a lot more productive thing I can be doing than butting heads with all those folks down on Capitol Hill. So,
great. And you have been an activist.
Yes.
And you're working in our community. What kind of work are you doing? Is that tied in with the church, or is that separate?
No, it's all tied in together. So I have been pastoring for the last 27 years. 6.5 in Washington, then 8 in Baltimore, and now the last 13 in Annapolis. I'm also the president of the Anne Arundel County branch, NAACP. Work with ministerial alliances, different community groups. So I've been very busy just trying to work with our folk and then work with others who are woke and willing to work with our folk to improve things in our community.
When you think about the church, and Kris, you probably have more experience than I had. I went to a church school, but that's about it. If it hadn't been for the school, there would have been no church. So, in other words, for me, there would have been no church.
Sure,
but as I reflect on the days of going to a church, or just thinking about what church meant to my grandmother, and how she was a devout, humble, conservative, modest Christian woman, although she definitely stretched the boundaries to include history that I don't know the source of, but I would suspect it had something to do with her Native American roots. And when I think about that church that we used to go to, I would maybe visit her, and we would go maybe once a year to just the church, and I would listen to what was being said then. And I think about what it is that I've heard recently, as I might find myself either walking past the church, scrolling past a church sermon on the internet, or even attending. That it's a difference. There's a difference in the message. There's a difference in the delivery, and there's possibly, especially when you see some of these so-called mega churches, there's a different agenda. Tell us about this transition, and are we moving in the right direction, or have we lost our way?
Well, first understand that while mega churches are the largest iteration of the church that you see, that most people in the United States attend smaller congregations that are less than 100 to maybe several hundred. The congregation I pastor has about 400 and some members on the rolls. So the mega church phenomenon has not taken over the community, but of course that's what you see largely on television. I think unfortunately, in some instances, the church has become a lot more self-serving than community-serving. There are these praise centers where you can come and get your shout on and hopefully hear a good word and then going back home. But then there are any number of other churches that, in addition to the praise, are also about working in our community and uplifting families, supporting families, standing in the gap for our young people as they have to deal with some of these school systems and interact with law enforcement, etc. So as part of my job description, if you will, I go to court with you, I'll be in the hospital with you, I'll be in the cemetery with you, wherever you need for the pastor to be, that's where I am, and that's how I view ministry. So there are many who are doing it that way, and then there may be others who are more under bright lights who may not be so much, but don't fall for the okie doke. There's a lot of good stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. And then just like you were saying, I think there's definitely been a shift, a transition from how our grandmothers, attended church and had that experience. Nowadays, I think a lot of the younger generation, they're not even going. So what is the church doing, in terms of that? Are we growing with it? I know there are some, most of the churches are streaming live, or the bigger churches anyway are streaming live as a way to give people another opportunity to participate if they're not able to make it in. But in terms of reaching the youth and making sure that they're, still, there will be a church, in 30 years.
I think that, of course, our lives have seasons, and so there might be that season where our young people are not as connected, but as the storms of life rage over time, that they will feel the same need for a spiritual center that our parents did and our grandparents did and our great-grandparents did. And they will find it somewhere, whether it's in the Christian church, whether it's in the Muslim community, African Hebrew Israelite, but somewhere they will find community that is meaningful and supportive. Essentially what we try to do is just to support them, to let them utilize their gifts and talents in the worship service and in the ministry of the church. Obviously there's some pushback from some of the elders, which is a problem, because my point to them is, I'll ask the question sometimes. It's not really a nice question to ask, but it is what it is. How many of you all are going to be alive in 30 or 40 years? And if you're talking to people who are 60 or 70 years old, most of them have to concede probably not. Well, Lord willing, most or all of these young people will be. Do you want this church to still be here and be meaningful in the community? And if so, they shouldn't have to, quote, wait their turn, sit on the bench and wait to be called in. We need to utilize their gifts and talents now.
Yeah. And I see that, and I can relate to something else that's a part of that conversation, which is, the day before you were saved, the week, the month, the year before you were saved.
We're not talking about that on air. I refuse to admit any of those things. We didn't have camera phones then. There are no pictures. There's no evidence. No evidence.
Right. And that's just it. We were dirty. We were dirty. We don't have anything we want to brag about from back in the day. Not in this circle, anyway. Like you said, you don't want to talk about that now. We did some very sinful things, right?
We've been called out of the darkness into the marvelous light.
Did I hear a confession, Kris?
Yeah, I was always an angel. I don't know about
No, that wasn't the confession.
We might knock you on the slide over because it's going to be incoming lightning strike any minute now.
Right. But when we think about, the fact that all of us have come from somewhere in order to get to where we are, and for any of us who have gotten to where we are and want to now curse those who came or who are where we came from,
are still there, right?
That's crazy. That's ludicrous.
Yes.
Because that means that you are now doing to them what you would have hated to have done to you, and that is people just say, there's nothing that we can do with them.
Right.
We're just going to give up on them. We're going to let that generation, we just need to go ahead and let them die off, and then we're going to bring them in. No, that's crazy. That means that we're denying the power of the most significant, powerful, omniscient, omnipresent force. And force is probably not the right word. It is,
Presence, yeah.
And we're denying it. And that's an unfortunate thing that many of us do. And I think we deny, not only do we deny it as we point in the sky or point to a picture on the wall, but most critical to me And my upbringing, my understanding, it was the God in you. So the God in me, we're denying the God power and essence and force inside of us by just accepting or neglecting, our responsibility to the people, and our responsibility to be those saviors and those healers and those people that show the way, that shine the light on the path. So that's some good stuff, and I'm glad.
And what you're talking about is judgment, basically.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things our young people say sometimes. They'll say it often in humor, but don't judge me.
Right.
But that's what we do.
Right.
And so Jesus, with his humor, but also very poignantly said, how can you tell your brother or sister about the splinter in their eye when you have a beam in your eye?
Right.
First take the beam out of your eye, then you can see clearly to help them take the splinter out of their eye.
That's it.
So none of us have any room to judge.
That's right. That's right. We're talking to Brother Stephen Tillett, and he is an author, a pastor, a former, hood so and so and so and so, and but he's come away from all of that now. He's a new man. He's been made anew. This is a new day, and he's an author of a book called "Stop Falling for the Okie Doke."
Yes.
And we've heard that term. We probably don't hear it as much anymore because that's like an old
school
term. Yeah, that's old school.
Mm-hmm.
What's the okie doke? Exactly. Stop falling for it. Tell us about this book.
Okie doke is nonsense. It's foolishness. It's a scam. It's
Come on,
a
man.
hustle.
That's like every day. That's all day. That's all that there is.
Same
out
stuff,
here.
different day. Correct. Yes,
Right.
that's exactly what the okie doke
One
is.
way to say it.
But yes, we're
Yes,
trying
sir.
to keep it clean.
Yes, sir.
But the subtitle of the book is How the Lie of Race, with the word race in quotes, continues to undermine our country. And we have to understand that race is an artificial concept. It's not scientific in nature, but it is a social construct, but it has been presented as if it is a scientific ontological reality. And the problem with that is that when people accept that, they can then in their minds say that someone else is a different expression of humanity or is subhuman or whatever, and therefore should be treated poorly. But the Human Genome Project, which was doing their work in the early part of this century, has concluded that our genetics at the DNA level, we are 99.9% the same. If you look at the skin, this is 1/64th of an inch. And as somebody who in my military career spent some time working at the mortuary and having witnessed some autopsies, I can tell you it is what it is. When you open somebody up, it's all the same on the inside. And so this okie doke, this lie of race, has been perpetrated to keep people of common interest and common concern separated for the purpose of keeping the pockets filled of those who benefit from our separation.
What say you, Kris?
Right. I was taking it all in. It is interesting because if you take that out, like you said, we're all the same. But I feel like it's always going to be something. If it's not race, it can be height, it can be weight, it can be, I don't know, if you wear polka dots, it can be anything, because we like doing that. We like separating, like you said, because it benefits someone.
But you can decide to wear polka dots.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You can choose, and with hard work and hopefully genetics not working against you, you can choose to lose weight or gain weight.
Right.
We can't choose not to have this melanin that God gifted us with.
Right.
Full body tattoo.
Yeah. We are sun-kissed, and praise God for it.
Yes, indeed. And I don't think we understand the value of it. But I got an issue with what you're saying, and I don't know how many people raise this, and I'm sure you're prepared, but what do you mean there's no such thing, or you're diminishing this concept of racism? No.
See, what I'm saying is that there's prejudice.
Okay.
But I'm saying that racism is based on a false concept. It's based on a shaky foundation.
They're businesses, they're organizations, they're nonprofit and multiple organizations that are out there. They're governments who recognize a people by their race. How then would we be identified if we're not identified as black, white, and so on? I guess that's the race way of defining a group by nowadays its color, right?
Right.
So you're saying that institution
is okie doke. It's nonsense. But it is a contrived, intentionally contrived in order to have control. And to keep folks separated. So what I'm saying is that there's one race, the human race.
Okay.
And then there are ethnicities within the human race. In the same way, if you looked at a beagle, what's a beagle? What is a beagle? What's a collie? What's a collie?
A dog.
What's a German shepherd?
A dog.
We don't say there are different, entirely different form of creation from each other. We say that they're different breed within the category of dog, but they're all dogs. The way that people have come to understand the social concept of race is that we are entirely different in our created order in some way, such that some feel, well, we're created here and you're created here. And that's just not true. We're all here, all created by the Creator, and then what we do with that afterward determines how we interact with each other, whether it's done respectfully and with decency, or whether it's centered around control. It's like my sole objective in life is to control you and pimp you and make money off of you. And so what I'm saying...
Does it stop there? Does it stop there, control and make money off of you and pimp you? Is that where it stops? And I have an answer for that. I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I think at the end of the day, it's not about money. And I don't think it's about control. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's about the survival of I'm going to use this expression, I'll have to change it later on, a race family. And I realize that doesn't fit into...
Or an ethnic family.
An ethnic family.
Okay.
So there's a group of people, I don't even know that it's like people that are, I would say, okay, here's how I would define it. So it would be the unmelanated people. Or the melanated people. So we can define this as that. So the unmelanated people have decided that they need to not only pimp, control, and make a bunch of money off of, whatever it is that we can do, whether we're in jail, out of jail, on the street, on the corner, or wherever we are, that they're doing that. But at the end of the day, you also see that our race family is expiring. And in America, we're deceived into believing that it's not. But what is happening in the United States of America is we're getting so many immigrants coming in of color that our population numbers are staying the same. But the number of us that are descendants of the transatlantic slave trade or the slave trade in America are diminishing. We're going down very quickly. And if we think back to, I know I've read a couple pages of the Bible, and we think back to the unblemished that were removed from the continent, but at that time, of course, it was out of Egypt. Or Nebuchadnezzar, wherever he pulled them from, that he was looking to get the unblemished. And you think about those that came over here, were sent over here to the United States of America, and there must be something about us that is peculiar, that is special, that makes us, worthy of this, this job of building this new nation. And building, and supporting these people who were either lazy or just clever and capitalist beyond measure. That there's something about us that's making the United States turn its back and a blind eye to what is happening to us. The United States, the majority of the population, the businesses, even our own people, we're turning a blind eye to what is taking place. And I don't think it's about money. I think money, it looks like money, control, and pimping, but I think at the end of the day, it's about, okay, if we can erase them, then we'll never have to worry about them. And this carries over from the days of Pharaoh, when, Puah and Shifra were told, okay, if it's a man-child, let's do away with it. No different than, during the time of what you say Jesus, I say Yeshua, that there was, okay, we need to kill the firstborn, right, for fear of there being this Messiah who would deliver these people. I think we're still, under that same reality, and somebody's living that, and somebody else is deluded into believing that, everything is okay. It's no, there are no bad people. Everybody's good. There's always good in somebody.
So much you said.
I know. I apologize.
I'll go with the first thing first.
Okay.
You talked about the melanated and the unmelanated. Understand that the unmelanated are descendant from folks who were melanated. And because of their relocation from Africa, they have become less melanated. But part of the scientific piece that I deal with largely in chapter 2 of Stop Falling for the Okie Doke addresses the fact that there is a founder population, if you will, on planet Earth that we originated in Africa. And that's why our genome, even 7,000 generations later, is still so similar, because there has not been enough time, scientifically speaking, for us to have become wholly different and other forms of creation. So we all started in Africa. There was dispersion around the world. People traveled and explored and whatnot. And for those who went to colder climates and climates with less sun, they lost some or most of the melanin. But they're still our cousins. That's the first thing. The second thing, and I'll be bouncing around because you did, but you talked about how our population has grown stagnant. Part of our population growing stagnant is the fact that we're killing each other. And for however upset we want to be when there is an unjust murder, whether you are Trayvon Martin being murdered by a guy who picked a fight with you and was losing it, and so he pulls out a gun, or whether you're Tamir Rice outside playing on a playground and a cop comes and shoots you within 5 seconds, not realizing that it was a toy, not even asking, or if you're John Crawford III shopping in Walmart outside of Dayton, Ohio, and you have a gun over your shoulder. Why? Probably because you're going to buy it, because Walmart is the #1 gun seller in the United States, and you weren't menacing anybody, and when the police came up on you, you didn't hear them giving whatever commands they were giving because you were on the phone with your fiance, and so you get shot in the back. I don't know how it is that African Americans, that our backs are so threatening that we get shot there so much. So, but what I'm saying is we get upset about those, but then it's a daily drumbeat of how many young brothers, mostly brothers, some sisters, but mostly brothers, have killed each other on an almost daily basis. And so that's one of the reasons why our numbers are declining, and then obviously, or are stagnating. And then obviously the fact that you have brothers who are away from their families for a long, long time, being enrolled in the prison industrial complex, a number of whom are there for nonviolent offenses that, and under Attorney General Holder and President Obama, they were starting to try and turn that around so that those folks could get out of jail earlier and go back to community and try and rebuild their lives. And now we have Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, and we have the President of the Electoral College who has hired Jeff Sessions, and they're trying to turn it right back around and make the laws even more stringent. So those are the things that we need to be concerned about. But here's why I say it's about money. If all white people were doing well and it was just brown people who were getting messed over, I could co-sign what you're saying. But there are any number of white folks who are getting just as messed over as we are, except for the color of the skin being an instant magnet to maybe attract some negative attention. What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is share a little bit from a speech Dr. King gave in 1965 at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March. He talked about how this whole concept of white supremacy and whatnot were developed. And he said that initially you had white folk and black folk who were there in the South, and when the white folks complained about their wages, the business owner said, you know what, we can fire you and hire the coloreds and pay them even less. So as a result of that, they had the lowest wage in the country, in the South. And so King goes on to say, so then the populist movement comes along and tells the poor whites and poor blacks, say, you all know you're being messed over by the same folks, and they're using you against each other. But if you come together, they're not going to have anybody to do the work but you, and if you stand together, they're going to have to pay you a fair wage. King then says, to meet this threat, the Southern aristocracy began immediately to engineer this development of a segregated society Through their control of mass media, they revised the doctrine of white supremacy. They directed the placement on the books of the South of laws that made it a crime for Negroes and whites to come together as equals at any level. So in response to the populist movement and poor whites and poor blacks saying we're both getting messed over by the same folks, we need to come together, they then passed laws that make it illegal. He goes on to say, it may be said of the Reconstruction era that the Southern aristocracy took the world and gave the poor white man Jim Crow. And when his wrinkled stomach cried out for the food that his empty pockets could not provide, he ate Jim Crow, a psychological bird that told him no matter how bad off he was, at least he was a white man, better than the black man, and he ate Jim Crow. President Lyndon Baines Johnson put it this way: if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't know you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him someone to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. That's the okie doke, and it has been applied so skillfully over the years in using the courts and using legislation, going back to the time when we were first brought to the continent and people were indentured servants. And after a while, it's like, well, we're going to need some people to keep doing the work, so we're going to give the whites, once they have served their 7 years or whatever of indentured servitude, we're going to give them a firearm and some property and a horse and some seed and let them go out and begin to build their lives. But you brown people, you're going to be enslaved for perpetuity, and your children who come for perpetuity. And so that then the difference where there was some coming together of indentured whites and blacks back in the 1700s and 1600s, after they started to pass laws that changed it, they elevated the station of the poor whites just a little bit, but just enough so that they could say, well, at least I'm not as bad off as they are. And that then created this false divide that has been built over the years and watered and fertilized and nourished, and saying they're different, they're entirely different form of humanity than we are, and therefore they're less than we are. And so they've given poor people somebody to look down on so that they're not as focused on their own poverty because they're looking at people who are worse off than they are, or they're blaming brown people and other poor people for their circumstance, like whites who are struggling and they want to blame Latinos who are coming into the country, but they're doing jobs you don't want to do. You don't want to go out in on any farm and pick fruit all day, and black folk don't want to do it because we're African Americans, because we've been there, done that, and we did it for free. So one of the things that I've read recently is that the price of produce is going to go up this year and in the ensuing years, because you have folks that they're chasing out of the country, people that are now afraid to come into the country, and as a result, it's going to cost more to harvest that fruit, and it's therefore going to cost us more in the store.
Yes, indeed. Kris, you are so talkative today. It's amazing I'm sorry. Kris is deep in thought, as all of this is probably not just new, but, it causes us to, consider our lives and how this impacts our lives. Now, one thing I'd like to say is, I don't, and I wish I could have caught you and we talked about it, but I realize that my position is, I just run the joint. I can't really dictate anything, but I don't like putting Supreme and white together. I look at it as...
I don't like putting Supreme and anything together.
Okay. So I look at it as a response to an inferiority complex. And maybe even after hearing your definition, I realize that there's even more modification that might need to go into that after seeing the strategy that's being used against us and against others and against their own kind. That there's something else that's going on inside of this mind. And it makes me reflect on something. I don't know whether either of you are familiar with it, but have you heard of this concept of Yakub?
No.
Okay. Well, it was shared with me, and I've read about this idea that there was Yakub was an albino that was separated from the African, the darker complected African, cursed and separated and banished and sent to the north, and it was he and others who, like he, that were sent there and sought refuge there in order that they wouldn't be killed, and they began to of course, populate their land and repopulate. And on top of that, of course, living in that area of the world, food was scarce. There were a lot of things that were scarce, and as a result of the scarcity, you develop this, this greed and this, aggression that was not natural. When I visited Africa, I didn't see greed and aggression. I saw, people that wanted to give. They wanted to give. Everything that was theirs was yours, and, they were very thankful that you would visit their home or their country. And I can imagine somebody who comes from a space of greed and lack and having to fight for everything that you get and worrying about who's going to try to take something from you, that it causes you to be a lot more aggressive. So when this population of people, and I'm not saying that I know it to be true, but I'm just kind of paraphrasing it, they came back onto the Africans with this energy that the African was not prepared to respond to. And what we're seeing is that continuation of that energy, as we look up today and we see, certain things we look at, and it's like, well, what is the benefit beyond just erasing me from the planet? How do people come to the mindset of, I hate you from birth? I hate the fact that you're even here. I can't imagine, when I see a little black kid or I see a little white kid, an infant, I smile because it's, look at the innocence, look at the innocence of the child. They're just doing what they do. And I got restaurants, I got people that are bringing their children in all the time. And, you see that and you naturally respond. I'm not putting on. I'm really happy to see a little child trying to navigate through life and, making decisions, some good, some bad, learning from them. And, how could you, in your mind, create such an institution? You talked about the number of us that are incarcerated, the number of us that are killing one another, being killed by others. All of that, you add those numbers up, they can't touch the number of us that are dying in the womb of our mothers. The hundreds of thousands of us that are dying in the wombs of our mothers, at these abortion clinics that are so cleverly positioned in our community. And, meanwhile, our lighter or unmelanated brothers and sisters, they have fertility clinics in their neighborhood. So it's, again, I go back to, and I think we're on the same page. We're singing from the same sheet of music. You got the, whatever that is, not the bass line, I got the treble, or vice versa. And I just think that this thing is deep. It warrants our response. It warrants our conversation. We need to have the think tank. It just needs to be at some point a think tank on survival. You've got 2 kids. You're thinking about life and what you're going to give them so that they can navigate. Not just, I can't just wake up and think about, I'm just going to breathe some fresh air today and I'm going to do some nice things for people. Somewhere in my mind, every single day, every time I encounter somebody, I have to think about protecting myself, defending myself, surviving. I have to survive this encounter. And I realize that this encounter could turn out really bad. I've seen it happen on television, in movies. I've seen it happen on the 6 o'clock news. I've seen it happen in my, personally. I've been there. And, when you think about racism and you think about your children, Kris, and what you need to instill within them so that they could have a chance against this, one, how big is it to you, and how do you set them up and prepare them for being in this world?
Right, it's difficult, especially nowadays when we have social media, we have YouTube, and there are so many new truths being exposed on a daily basis. It's like, okay, well, which truth do I teach them? I was raised in the church. I don't take my kids to church, and I started out that way, and now they're asking, can we go? And it's like, I don't have an answer yet. I just know something's not right. I haven't figured it out yet. So I found it to be very difficult. In terms of race, I am on the page of, making sure they have exposure to everyone. Because that was my experience. I said I went to St. Timothy's School. There were only a handful of us, I guess you could say, there, but it didn't impact me in a negative way. It made me feel like I have access to whatever I want to do. I didn't feel limited. I don't have to stay in PG County or in this place or that place because I belong there. It opened up the world for me, and so that's what I want for them when we go shopping, when we do things. Even trying to find a place to live, I want to be somewhere where they have exposure to know that they're not obligated to be in a certain place because of their skin color. So for me, when I'm teaching them, it's like, every day I wake up and I try to figure out what's best for them. And so a lot of the times, because they are still so young, I don't have these conversations. But my hope is to have it figured out more. Yeah, they're 6 and 4, so I know it's coming. So hopefully I'll have it together when that time comes. But for now, it's a lot.
It's difficult to to avoid the okie doke. Because at some level, capitalism requires you to buy in. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to at some level say, okay, I'm going to deny just a little bit because I want to get that opportunity. You know, I'm gonna look the other way just a little bit because I see this opportunity to generate some more income for myself. You know, it's how do we get? Okay, so the okie doke, Stop Falling for the Okie Doke is the name of our brother Stephen Tillett's book. The okie doke has become, at one point it was maybe a concept, but now we've bought in and it's like the reality. There's some people that have given life to it to the extent that it is real. It is alive. And the okie doke is no longer an okie doke concept. It's the okie doke reality for some people who will defend it, who will stand up and scream and beat their chest and say, no, it is here. I know because it's doing it to me and I'm being affected. How do we, how do we go forward and avoid or create a defensive and an offensive against falling for the okie doke?
Part of that is education. Mm-hmm. People need to see and understand their position. Mm-hmm. What they're really going through, and then how their condition is similar to what others are going through. I'll give you an example. In the book I talk about, I reference an article that I read about Owsley County, Kentucky. If you were to ask somebody, well, where's ground zero? Where's the food stamp capital of the world? And somebody, well, Baltimore, Chicago, L.A., New York, D.C., Detroit. No. Owsley County, Kentucky, 99.22% white. Just about everybody there is a Republican, call themselves conservative. They have a member of, and they are per capita receiving more aid from the country, more benefits than any other area in the country. Now here's the irony, that their member of Congress and the party their member of Congress belongs to, and please don't feel like I care about Democrats or Republicans, but this is just true. Yeah. Their member of Congress and the party that he belongs to vote against the aid that they need to survive, are constantly voting to reduce the benefits that they receive. And what they do is they'll cast it out as, well, we need to deal with that welfare mother, the welfare queen that Reagan was talking about 30-some years ago, and we need to make sure that they're not getting over. And so as a result of this false optic of a welfare queen, their own constituents are getting messed over, but they don't see it. And so that requires education to open their eyes and say, okay, what I need you to do is look at yourself here in Owsley County, Kentucky. And now I want you to look at Jamal and Malika on the south side of Chicago or in Detroit or whatever. Mm-hmm. And let's just look at kind of the baseline, what level of income you have, the kind of benefits you live with, how you are dehumanized when you have to go in to get your benefits and deal with the system, etc. You all are both being gamed and mistreated and abused by the same system. So rather than beefing with each other, you need to look around and see who is it that is oppressing both of you. And my idea is that when people begin to see that there is okie doke, that they're all being gamed, that rich white folk don't want poor white folk around them anymore than they want black folk around them, okay? So when they begin to see and understand that, it's like they don't look at you as equals. You know, you are a slight hedge, a slight fence between them and brown people. Right. But they don't look at you as equals. And people need to understand that and then begin to act accordingly. And when we stop falling for the okie doke, we can hold the people who have held us all in some state of bondage or another accountable. The movie, The Free State of Jones, have you seen it? No. Okay, Matthew McConaughey, and Mahershala Ali and some others are in that movie. And so there's a point when McConaughey's playing the role of Newt Knight, who was a Confederate soldier, Mississippi Regiment. He was a medic. He deserted to take his cousin or nephew home to be buried. He was like 14 or 15, got killed. He takes him back to his cousin or sister so that the young man can be buried. And then he sees how the Confederate troops are mistreating the wives and families that have been left behind. They're supposed to be taking 10% of the crops and animals and whatever to support the military, and they're taking even more than that. And so he begins to form a resistance movement. They set dogs on him. He gets almost caught. He ends up, black folk help him, some of the former slaves and escaped slaves help him find his way out into, the swamp. So they're all hiding out in the swamp. Fast forward ahead, that after a while you got the former slaves there, you've got other deserters there, white deserters from the military, and there was a point when they had an opportunity to celebrate, and they're cooking this pig, and all the white folk are eating off the pig, and then near the end of it, when the pig is mostly gone, Mahershala Ali goes up, and he starts getting some of the meat, and one of the white guys says, "What you doing, nigger? That's not for you, nigger." I said, "Put it." So he's coming with the nigger word, the N word. And then Mahershala says to him, his name in his character was Moses. He says to him, "How you ain't?" And the guy looks surprised. He's befuddled. He doesn't understand. What? How you ain't? So McConaughey comes up to him and says, what he's saying is, they used to pick cotton for him. You were out there willing to die for him. What's the difference? Basically, what Ali was saying is, how you ain't a nigga like me? You out here in the swamp, just like me. And what poor white folk need to understand is, they won't want to hear it, but they niggas too. They've been treated like us, not like us, but treated like niggas in the concept of degrading and mistreating our people. They've been treated like niggas, and they need to look around and say, okay, so if I've been niggerized too because I'm poor or don't have education or I grew up in Appalachia or wherever, who's doing this to me? And then who's doing it to you? And then we all say, oh, you know what? It wasn't you because I'm broke and you're broke. How could I have done it to you? It's that guy over there. And then we focus our attention and energy on that. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference when oppressed people, not just brown people, but all oppressed people come together.
How much work does it take, though, to overcome an agenda that is funding this concept of divide and conquer?
Right.
You saw it in Rwanda with the Tutsis, and I can't remember the other group. Kris?
Is it Hutu?
The Hutu and the Tutsi. Yeah. And that this is working, and so now it's working. And Kris brought it up. Now the skinny people, they don't like the fat people, and the tall people, not the short people, the light, the dark, the old, the young, the okey-doke. We're just going for it across the board, and we feel justified, although it's not there. There's nothing there. When you go and look at okay, this is the reason why. Oh, there's no reason. But I've been doing it for so long now. It's just a part of my DNA. It's a part of my understanding. And this is how I got power and authority. So when I go to school the next day as a teenager, I'm going to go talk about the fat people and the old people and the ugly people, because that gives me credibility. I got street cred now. I can walk in and because I zoned him out, But that happens not only at that level, but it happens in relationships. It happens within families, the darker, the lighter, the taller, the shorter, the fatter, the line.
Which is really crazy, because Black family reunion, lottie-dottie and everybody.
Yeah.
You got hot, what do they say? Light, bright, damn near white. Yeah. And then you might have blue, black, and they're cousins. They might be brother and sister, depending. As I look at some pictures from my mother's paternal grandparents, my great-grandparents, and you look at her picture, she looks like Native American and maybe white. He's dark brown skin, and then their kids are all along the continuum. But they're brothers and sisters. I talk in the book about some twins that were born in Great Britain a few years ago. And both of their parents were multicultural. They had a white parent and a brown parent. And twin girls, one of them was born, for fraternal twins obviously, one of them is born clearly with the markers of the white side of the DNA. And the other one's born clearly with the markers of the brown side of the DNA. And the media immediately captions this as two children of different races born to the same mother. And it's like, hold up. Same parents, nurtured in the same womb, sisters, twin sisters, and you're trying to separate them at birth, saying they're different races? How tortured is that? That's okey-doke. That's nonsense. But we have to have a willingness. There's a section in the book that I caption. The world is flat. You remember that back several hundred years ago, the thought was if you were a seafaring person, you needed to keep your ship not too far from shore, because we know that if you go far enough, you're going to fall off the edge of the earth, because the world is flat, the earth is flat. Eventually, they saw that that was not true, and then they went wherever they wanted to.
Did they?
But I'm talking about going all around the world. I'm saying going all around.
We're going to talk about that when you finish.
Go
Go ahead.
I'm saying that ships eventually going all around the world.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because, it's a curvature. We can keep going and eventually find our way back if we're not lost like Columbus was. But anyway, and that's another book for another day. But so in the same context with this lie of race,
Right.
This false ideology, this social construct of race, that when we've heard, well, we're entirely different forms of creation. You got black folks and white folks and red folk and yellow folk. Honestly, most people are brown. I've seen a few yellow people. Most folk are brown. Yeah. Okay? Indians, I haven't seen nobody red. They're brown. Mm-hmm. And which is actually gets to part of the problem. You talk about why some whites feel so threatened. It's because they're vastly outnumbered. They're in the majority here. They're in the majority in Europe. But the rest of the doggone world, probably 6 out of the 6.5 or so out of the 7.5 billion people on the planet are brown people.
Right.
Brown people in Asia, in Africa, Sri Lanka, India, brown people. And since brown genes have been shown to be dominant and the whiter genes have been shown to be recessive, that when folk come together, some of who they are gets lost in the coloring, so to speak. But at the end of the day, we're all people. Mm. I remember years ago when I first moved out to Prince George's County, when I left my parents' house, moved out to Suitland, Maryland, and I was in the Safeway one day and saw this woman who, if you looked at her, the dispersive description that somebody would have, or dismissive description somebody would have had on her was, well, she's a redneck, a woman with stringy hair and whatnot. And there was this baby boy in the cart with her, shopping cart. Little, brown-skinned baby, obviously had come from one of her kids and whoever that child of hers was dealing with. And so you have this mother, who's this grandmother, mm-hmm. and this brown-skinned baby interacting like a child and a grandparent. Sure. That's your grandparent. That's your grandchild. What are you going to do? Well, I don't, you brown, I don't want to be bothered. No, that's your grandbaby. End of discussion. Now, there are some people, because somebody else was telling me about that recently, that he's African American, his wife is white, and I think his father-in-law, who I believe is Native American, which is interesting, has gotten with the program. His mother-in-law won't even talk to his wife, almost holds it against her siblings when they talk to her, and wants nothing to do with those in children. Excuse me, those in children have, half their DNA came from you and your husband. 25% of them is you. And you're going to look at the other 50% and say they in children, I don't want nothing to do with them. That's foolish, but that's the okie doke that we have become so twisted that we will refuse to deal with the fruit from our own loins. I mean, that's madness. Right. And that's why we need to call it what it is. Understand that white folk are our cousins. Mm-hmm. We got the same founder population out of Africa in different places. People are now different shades, but we are the same human family. That's the foundation. The earth is not flat, and when we understand it, we have to start acting like it, or else we can't go too far, we're going to fall off the edge of the earth. No, we know better than that, but we keep acting like we don't know better than that, and keep staying, we don't want to go too far. But if we want this nonsense to end, we have to stop acting like the world is flat. Understand that we're all part of the same human family. Understand that we're all cousins. Understand that we got 99.9% the same DNA. And then look around and see what is it that is challenging my life being all it can be, and what is it that's challenging your life from being all it can be. Oh, gee, looks like it's the same stuff. Now, what are we going to do about it?
Right. And I like this perspective because it actually opens up my mind anyway to, a lot of different things. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, a combination of what you both were saying in terms of recognizing the source. Where is it coming from? And I think it's closer to what you were saying, it's hurt, because it's not race. A group of people, a person that's hurt has a certain amount of influence over others, and then it kind of works itself into a system where it affects everyone. But that's what it is. If people are hurt, then they're going to find something different about someone else and convince other people to push those people away. That's what it seems like, to me after just understanding more where you're coming from. So.
And we're going to have a conversation later. I'm going to send you some information because your flat Earth. I'm just going to throw it out there because there was a scientist named Copernicus who had decided that the Earth was round.
Right.
And he had no way of proving it, but he put a globe in every classroom as a result of him conceiving that the Earth was round. But prior to that, the belief and understanding was that the Earth was flat. And the scientists that had come to that conclusion were brown scientists. And so it's something that it deserves some attention because you would hate to fall for the okie doke and realize that there's something about them defining the Earth as round that is preventing us from getting to something else. And it's just as in our face as racism is the whole idea that the Earth is round. And you said something about curvature. The problem with curvature is water doesn't curve. But we're going to talk about that in another show. And it's a really, really good topic. We're having a really good discussion. I'm of the belief that this is something that's going to go on until. And I think it has a lot to do with, as you stated earlier, domination and control and manipulation and pimping and money, but also the removal of the threat. And we saw it happen in Little Africa. Do you all know where Little Africa is? Little Africa is Australia. And we saw Africa get completely flipped. As a result of there being a population of people who said, hey, you all represent a threat to us. We're gonna figure out how we can do away with you, and here it is. This is our strategy: mixing. So we'll either mix or annihilate you, and we see that happening there. But I think it's a great discussion. Again, it warrants us having think tanks to come together and have open dialogue. Be prepared to hear something that you didn't hear before, accept something that is not necessarily the truth that you thought was the truth yesterday. Well, maybe that wasn't the truth. And now it's time to open up your mind to realize that the Earth is flat. But it's...
May I make one other point?
Yes.
This mess that we have found ourselves in, down the street in Washington, Lord have mercy.
I'm glad I'm not with y'all. Go ahead.
There is... The reason that we're stuck with the president of the Electoral College down the street is because the Electoral College has a legacy tied to slavery in the United States. James Madison, who's a constitutional architect and slave owner, said these words about creating the Electoral College. There was one difficulty of a serious nature, however, attending an immediate choice by the people. The right of suffrage was much more divisive in the North rather than the Southern states, and the latter could have no influence in the election on the score of Negroes. The substitution of electors obviated this difficulty and seemed on the whole to be liable to the fewest objections. So essentially what he's saying is that voting rights and the proportionality of voting rights in the North was not an issue of concern for the North, because they had the numbers and most of them weren't slaves. In the southern states, they had slaves who they would not allow to influence the election. So what they did was create the Electoral College, which eliminates Negroes from the equation but still gives southern states a certain number of votes and electors toward the election of a president. The other thought for the Electoral College, in addition to that's how it formed, then the other thought was that just in case the people, because they didn't trust the people, so they had a safety valve. If the people elect somebody crazy, the Electoral College can still make sure that doesn't happen.
Sure.
Which has shown us that it has a root in slavery, and then it did not work the way it was supposed to in the last election. And historically, here it is. There have been 5 elections in our nation's history where the person who won the popular vote did not get the keys to the White House. The first 2, I think, was in the John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. They're both founders of the country. They weren't going to blow things up over it. Andrew Jackson was not that happy about it, but he eventually got 2 terms. And frankly, that put off the Trail of Tears and forced relocation of Native Americans for 4 years. But then the last 3 have proven to be disastrous. Rutherford B. Hayes lost the election to Tilden. I forget what Tilden's name was, but in the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, 1876, will give the electors to Rutherford B. Hayes, who didn't win the popular vote, if you will take the northern troops out of the South, therefore bringing an end to Reconstruction, therefore launching us on the next 90 years of Jim Crow and apartheid in America and KKK and white citizens councils and terrorism, etc. That one. 2000, Gore wins. Supreme Court stops the recount before they're done recounting. Gore wins. The keys were given to Bush. Nothing bad happened then, did it? Oh, I don't know. We invaded a country that didn't attack us, got thousands of our people killed and wounded and maimed, over 100,000 Iraqis killed, mostly women and children. And then they crashed the economy. And now here we are in 2016. Hillary Clinton has the 3rd highest vote total in U.S. history. Obama 69 million, Obama 66 million, she's 65 million. Beats 45, Lord have mercy, by almost 3 million votes and doesn't get the keys. Why? Because of this holdover in our Constitution that was a slave era compromise. And then they want to say, well, it's built into the foundation of the country. It can't be changed. There were 10 amendments when the Constitution was drafted. How many are there now? 27. 27. They've changed the Constitution 17 times, and a half dozen of those changes corrected things that they had done first, and then they thought, no, we need to do it differently. Women need to be able to vote. African descendants are not 3/5 of a person. 18-year-olds need to be able to vote. People in states need to be able to vote for their senators rather than having them elected by their state legislatures, and it goes on and on. We're going to prohibit alcohol. Oops, that was a mistake. We're going to unprohibit alcohol. They've changed the Constitution 17 times. So they can't act like it's chiseled in stone and we can't do it because we've already done it 17 times. This needs to go, and until it goes, there will be that gaming of the system where then oppressing the voting rights of people and trying to claim that there's voter fraud when there's not. There was a study between 2000 and 2014, over 1 billion votes were cast. How many verifiable instances of voter fraud were there? Take a guess.
1,000.
31. Out of over 1 billion votes cast. That's 7 zeros, 0.000000031%. But they, oh my God, there's voter fraud. And so now they're turning back the clock, oppressing voters so that they can game the system and target trying to win the Electoral College, even when they know a majority of the country is not feeling their agenda, not feeling their candidates often, but they've got this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's all tied to the okie doke.
But the farmer, and you probably heard it, but I'll say it again for those of you out there who've never heard it, the farmer is never going to let the cows and the pigs and the chickens take over his position, usurp him, and run the farm. It's not going to happen. And we have deluded ourselves if we believe that all of a sudden those who are in power, who are now taking other countries, the central bank, the Federal Reserve, and the Rothschilds, and the Rockefellers, and whoever else is out there.
Now you sound like my son.
They're not going to give up power, and I wouldn't give up power either. If I said, look, we've done all of this, we done killed all these people and took all these people's lands and did all this wrong. We ain't about to all of a sudden get a good heart now and start doing right by them. It's not going to happen. So even in our best, with our best intentions, we have to understand that under the system of Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel, Azariah, Mishar, and Ashariah, I can't remember the other one, but It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point we have to do as Moses, did and got the word to do. We got to get out of here, and we have to find that place that's been set aside for us that we could then establish a government of people that are aligned with the universe, that are aligned with our Maker, that are aligned with one another, who want to build something that's going to, at some point, be strong enough to begin to counter this. First conceptually, then physically, or however that happens. Many of these wars don't even have to take place because the Creator does it in the Creator's way. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, where'd they go? we don't know, but it doesn't matter now, because now I'm going to move into that house right there. So it's, I think the okie doke is real. I think the okie doke is on multiple levels. I think it's not just racism. I think it's on so many different levels. We've been deluded into believing that what we see is what is. It's not the case. It's not the case. And we do need to, again, have the dialogue. We need to talk about it. We've got children that are coming up behind us that don't have a clue. And if we leave it up to them to look at television, listen to the radio, or listen to the people talking at the barbershop, the church, or the beauty salon, they're going to get the same, okie doke. So, we're very thankful to have Brother Stephen Tillett on to talk to us about his book and to talk to us about his concepts, talk to us about his ministry. You wanna find out more about him. Give us your contact information so our listening audience.
The company that we have established, that's sort of the parent company for this, is called Connecting the Dots LLC, and we can be reached at www.connecting-the-dots-LLC. Sorry for all the hyphens, but that's what was available. .com, and you can order a book there. You can reach us there if you want to have a dialogue or a book signing, conversation, presentation, whatever. Glad to come out and engage in that, because we have a lot to do. The book is also available at the iUniverse website, www.i and then the word universe.com, or of course at amazon.com. It's available paperback, hardcover, and ebook.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Kris?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, and opening up my mind to just new thoughts. I love that. We have some exciting events coming up.
We do. I need my Facebook page opened up so I can read them verbatim. But because you have such a good memory, we're going to rely on you. Kris, what you got for us?
The Solstice Bazaar is back this week, and that's always exciting, but especially exciting this week because we have a celebrity chef cooking demonstration. Chefs Lauren Vanderpool and Katie Awadu. Did I mess that up? Keedy. Chef Keedy is coming in, and that's this Saturday from noon to 6 p.m. If you check out our Facebook page, all of the details are there. The Solstice Shopping Bazaar right here at Everlasting Life, 9185 Central Avenue in Capitol Heights, Maryland.
That's great. What else is going on? Anything?
I think that's it.
We have movie night. Is it movie night this week? I think we got movie night.
Friday 7 to 9.
Yep, 7 to 9. We always have, we're very thankful to Al Kumar for continuing this effort to educate and empower our community with information so that they can figure this okie doke out and figure out what way to go.
Right.
So we do that every Friday from 7 until 9. We do have 3 restaurants for those of you all who are so inclined to not fall for the okie doke and eat the standard American diet that is destroying our health.
Can you come down to Annapolis, please?
Yes, indeed.
Please.
No more Crack Donalds, Murder King, Taco Hell, Wind Disease, Chokers, Bow Strangles, the International House of Pulmonary Heart Disease, or the Calculated Feminization of our community, otherwise known as KFC. We're getting beyond that. We're moving out of that. We're being birthed through that process to a point where now we're going to everlasting life. Right here, 9185 Central Avenue in Capitol Heights, Maryland. Also, we have Evolve Vegan Restaurant right next to the Tacoma Park Metro Station. That's 341 Cedar Street. And we have Vigoritos, a vegan burrito shop. If that chip company could do it, then why can't we do it and be successful at it? They got a line. We need a line too. But in order to get that and have that and sustain that, we need you. So come on through, check us out at any of the 3 really nice vegan restaurants. Kris, anybody else out there?
Well, if you're a fan of happy hour, join us tomorrow night at Evolve. That's the 341 Cedar Street address, Evolve. We're going to be doing buy one, get one half off drinks, the cocktails. We have a very special, brand new cocktail list and very popular. So we want you to join us in Tacoma Park tomorrow night. What is it, 5? Until he kicks us out.
5 to 9, 10 o'clock. Again, an opportunity for you to socialize, connect up with others. If it's something that you do, why not do it there?
Right.
And while you're there, eat some healthy food, connect up with some healthy people.
Right.
And let's start coming together. You know, let's not judge. Don't judge me. Let's come together and share some love and life. And also, I didn't mention the address for Vigoritos. That's 6904 4th Street in Northwest Washington, D.C. 6904 4th Street in Washington, D.C., just a block away from the Tacoma Park Metro Station. It's been a great show. I want to thank our guest who's been here in the studio. I want to thank you for coming on board with us and sharing your keen wisdom and insight into a dilemma that has seemingly overwhelmed our community, but needs somebody who can shine the light on the path for us to recover.
That's right.
So we appreciate Brother Stephen Tillett for coming on board with us today. We look forward to having you back so we can talk about the flat earth.
I look forward to it.
That's it, Kris.
That's
Send
it.
us out of here.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching the Elife Parlance Show with Dr. Baruch and Kris Murray. Until next time, take care, guys.
Bye.